Welcome to another video. We're going to be talking about Travis Bickle. We'll also be talking about Fleck. And we're going to be talking about the distinctions between Fleck and Travis Bickle. We'll also be talking to other characters who play in Taxi Driver. We will not be talking too much about the Joker, Joker the movie, because I say that movie just revolves mostly around Joker himself and his life. We could be going here and there about Penny and a few other characters, but we're not going to be going into the whole characters and what they do and what they don't do. I think that the way that plays out in Taxi Driver, where Betsy and Iris are important, is because they kind of lead, the actions kind of lead to what Travis does. So that's why we're going to be talking about those characters more. We could be talking about the characters in Joker, you know, the robbers that try to kind of stab that woman, and then they go up to him and they kind of try to, you know, threaten him. They're not major characters. I don't really know their names as well, so they don't really play that major of a story plot. It's mostly him trying to find the truth about his family, trying to find the truth about what's going on. He's trying to, you know, fit in, similar to where that Travis does, but it's mostly based on Fleck, based on Joker. It's not based on Penny. Plays probably the second major. She plays probably the second most part. That's why she's kind of important as well, but no one else is that important, I would say. You could say Thomas Wayne is quite important because he does kind of we don't really know if he's his father or he's not his father. We have to judge it by the way we see it. If I have to give my opinion, I think he is, but it's based on your judgment and based on what you think. You can tell me in the comments, do you not think? I think this movie's almost 2 years old, so I think most people already have their opinion about it. Obviously we could talk about Sophie Dumont as well. I mean, she's more of a kind of the way I would say it. She's almost like that schizophrenic hallucination of what a person you idolize, who you find similar, would be like, and she's kind of his archetype, his kind of person that he feels like close and feels like likes him for what he is. That's what I'm trying to conclude. It's someone that he wants in the society, but he knows it's not real, but it's someone that he imagines, right, in that kind of way. We can also be talking about Murray Franklin. That's the person that Joker kind of feels inspired to be, because that's kind of like his father, the person that he was kind of influenced by when growing up. Even looking in the movie, he laughs at him, and those scenes are quite sad in my opinion, because it's like a person who doesn't really have that person who he can look up to, and he has to look up to a person on the screen. It's kind of sad because you can't really necessarily be what you want to be. It's like you gotta look at someone on the TV and you judge it by that, and you hope to be like them. It's kind of sad. And he's also a part-time comedian, so it kind of makes sense, and his day job is a clown, so you know that kind of it mixes in, those two things mix in perfectly. So I'm blabbering along so much right now, but we can go on and talk about, but the thing is I want to talk about is the personality disorders on Travis Bickle, because his whole persona changes the same way the Joker does. It changes throughout the movie, especially during the climax, during the middle. It does change, but during the end, Travis is different to Joker, because Travis obviously returns to what he previously was in the start of the film, which was very destructive kind of person who didn't really have enough enjoyment out of life. He was quite isolated, quite hated what surrounded him, not necessarily bullied, but just didn't like, he kind of judged the world based on what he saw and what he thought, without actually thinking it deeper. You know, he's kind of like a walking time bomb. Like, he's gonna burst out soon, and that's not good. That's the way. I think mental health is kind of a big issue. Even now, it's nowadays a big issue. So I think Joker try to kind of show it, like try to show that mental health is not good, and people should actually look at it more seriously. And I think it still gets scrubbed aside by a lot of people. A lot of people don't look at mental health, and then people lock themselves away, and then they commit something that's bad, and they're like, I never expected that this person will do that and do that, you know, because he always looked happy. But you know, the most happiest people are always the ones that do something, not like something bad to themselves, you know. And even people who just pretend that they're fine, and like whatever, workplace, school, whatever, wherever you are, whatever person you are, even if they do find love, like they do kind of present themselves as looking they're fine. And some people are very good at hiding their whole true nature, and they're very hard to spot, because some people can be very emotionally detached and very cold. So it's kind of can be quite hard to kind of spot who is quite not in the right mindset. But I think if you want to talk to that person, because I feel like talking to a person who's feeling bad, like emotionally hurt, can actually benefit if you kind of, and don't try to be in your face. It's like, be like a person who's just like ironic, sarcastic type of thing. Make that person laugh in that kind of way. Try to do it in a jokey kind of way. Kind of, it should not be serious. That's the only what I want to kind of address. But without addressing this enough, let's talk about Taxi Driver, and can talk about the philosophical influences of Taxi Driver. Talk about the philosophical. I want to talk about schizoid and schizotype, but I think I'm going to lead a bit towards a different, because I want to have this kind of separated. So we'll be talking about philosophical influences, right? So Taxi Driver is obviously, well, just the story follows Taxi Driver in a way that Travis Bickle was in Vietnam War. It took place not long after the Vietnam War, and this events what took place after, during the Vietnam War, before the Vietnam, we don't really know, and this event's only what follows up. So it only follows up what after happened with Vietnam War. So, and the most interesting part for me when I watched the Taxi Driver, we don't, as much as I watched it a couple of times, and I never really followed up where anyone that Travis Bickle has, like family or anything, it feels like they're non-existent. Even, I don't know if they exist or don't exist, but even if they do exist, so why do they not kind of like, write emails, or kind of write, not emails because the emails weren't a thing in 76, but like write like a mail or something. It looks like they don't even care about him. It's like not even his family cares about him. So it's kind of like he's really just pushed aside. I don't know. That's the thing that I always thought about. Like, that was kind of like a shower thought all the time when I watched the movie. It's like, why do no one cares in his bloodline about him? Like, and it's like, family I don't think should care much, but I think at least one person should, at least one person should be like, what is this person doing right now? Just like have like this kind of out of the box thinking, have this kind of deep thought, and none. I don't know. It's kind of like no one cares about him. It's like Betsy cares more than anyone like he has in family. This movie, I feel like it has its horrors, especially of the 70s, New York 70s, and the streets and all, and it has this kind of very kind of weird tendencies where I feel like when watching it back, it has this racist, toxic masculinity and this underage prostitution. I don't know if that happened in the 70s back in New York. I wasn't even born. I wasn't even close to being born, so I don't know what was going on, but there was a few kind of like that kind of things that was kind of like quite, that was not quite enjoyable. That was the difference between Joker didn't really have that really much kind of thing, that kind of that kind of extreme points. It was more kind of like, well, there was like an anarchy thingy, but that wasn't like disturbing, because I think a lot of kind of disturbed, especially as I would describe in a Myers-Briggs type indicator way. I think that Joker's an INFP, and I think a lot of INFPs kind of try to be quite independent as well as Travis is, but they're more they kind of trill on this kind of extreme kind of independence in a way that they're kind of revolving around things like anarchy and being free. I know a lot of like unhealthy INFPs can be quite like that. Some unhealthy INFPs can look like ISTJs, and they can be quite more secretive, more looking like they are planned, organized, and all things like that. But it can also be very they can also almost look like Hamlet-esque from Prince Hamlet from Hamlet. But the psychology is still quite of an angle in this film. Like, it's a really philosophical angle if you think about it. You might think, why is it a philosophical angle? And I can prove the reasons why it's a philosophical angle. Like, the taxi driver feels a lot like in Sartre's story Nausea. You got Anton Requintin, who in Sartre's existentialist tenets, he talks about with Requintin about burden and responsibility that comes with being a species gifted or cursed with free will. That man alone is responsible for his choices, and where those choices consequently lead him is at once a liberating and crippling statement. And most of Sartre's fictions starred protagonists torn just between these two: liberating freedom, crippling depression. Another key tenet is the inherent meaninglessness of life, but of mankind's responsibility to find meaning in it by making their own choices. That's what happens to Nausea and Anton Requintin. Is I think at the end of Nausea, it says the day is another day. There's going to be another day raining across this town, or something along those lines. I haven't read that story in a year, but he almost says that the day is still going to continue to rain, and it's going to still continue to be, it's still going to continue to be depressing, and it's not going to change. And that's kind of the way that kind of way that Taxi Driver ends. It's like the day has ended and it's still going to rain. It's still going to pour down, and it's still going to be the same as it was in the beginning. But enough with this philosophy. There's let's start off the movie, and the movie has a lot of context and a there's a lot of things in the movie. We can go back to this. I don't want to go away from this philosophical discussion, but a lot of existentialist characters, even in Dostoyevsky's fictions, have the common traits that they feel superior to other beings, that looks down upon them in the same way that Travis does. Travis looks upon anyone who he thinks isn't as good as him, and we can see it. Like, remember when he talks about, I hope a real rain and comes and washes all this scum off the street. Like that is quite, you're kind of judging it by your own lens, but you're judging it you don't really know what's going on in other people's lives. You can't really judge other people's lives if you're not in their lives. So even if a person chooses to be this or that, it might be because they don't have anything, or they have no money, or they have no one. Like, they could be in the same situation as you. So anytime you see across a person and he's angry at the world, or he's angry at you, don't be angry at them. They may have problems, or they're doing something that you're not doing. They may have problems. It's like, we all have problems in our lives that goes through day in, day out. And we don't know, because a lot of people don't want to share these problems. Especially if they don't know you. They're strangers. Like, most of strangers don't share things. But that's just the thing I wanted to describe. Travis is like that. He is not really like religious or anything. He doesn't really, we can't really judge if he's a Christian or atheist in his existentialism, but his relationships with Betsy and Iris were ill-defined, and they placed him in a kind of moral high ground, especially on Travis's part. He wants to quote-unquote save these women, even though their women themselves don't want to be really saved. And the reason is because maybe Iris can figure out herself how to change this, how to lead from this problem, especially from this thing that she had, like this underage prostitute. She can do it herself, and doesn't have to be violence. Everything doesn't need to be fist fights or solved by, it could be solved by words. And as well as Betsy's, she works as she's a clerk in Palatine, in New York. Senator Palatine, who Travis tries to assassinate because he holds a grudge. I think in one of the scenes he went even into the businesses, and they called him a maniac. Well, he was quite acting ill. He was quite acting ill, defined as it says ill. He wasn't acting. He was acting out of character, in my point of view. But it's the way you find how Travis goes around, and it's like, even looking at the mirror scene, it's like, are you talking to me? You're talking to me. There's times when you feel bad for Travis, even though you don't feel bad for him when he does these idiotic things that he does. But then he's like, that loads of people have these problems, and these problems might rely because there's not good enough mental institutions, or not good enough people who they can actually bring him the help that he needs. Or maybe even if these people can help him, there's not a thing that can actually resolve this issue that he does have. And this is the quite problem in this society nowadays, and it's probably going to be quite a problem in the future, especially because I don't know if it's going to change. I can't judge because I'm not a fortune teller, but but anyways, for some people it's definitely gonna still be like quite of an issue. So I don't know, we were talking about that, but let's go with Travis' self-obsession. He has quite self-obsession. He's quite narcissistic. He also has a problem with alcohol problem. He's quite disorganized. He even says in himself, I want to get organized one day, because he feels quite disorganized. And he obviously, like I said, he's quite narcissistic. He even brings Betsy to a first date, an adult movie, which doesn't go right. And then he writes his diary religious. That diary writing almost reminds me of Adaptation with Nicolas Cage. Great movie, check it out. It's about it's again about a guy who doesn't have great as well. He has problems. He has problems well inside himself, and he's kind of he wants to be an aspiring writer, but he has problems of putting himself out there. And it's a great movie to check out if you're a writer and you're in that kind of situation as he is. That Urobo scene where he kind of talks to kind of himself. There's another self, there's another shadow of him, and he's like, it's like the snake who's biting his tail. It's like Uroboros, it's like you. And then he's like, I'm solipsistic, I'm narcissistic, I'm all these things. He kind of realizes to himself. Travis is kind of the same in this situation. He's like, June 28th, I'm starting to train again. I'm getting a bit more organized. I'm lifting weights. I'm trying not to drink as much. And it's like he writes this thing, and it's like even June 4th, like he writes about June 4th in the way he's like the problems still arising. I think there's, I don't really remember the quote fully, but he's like he almost describes it as the days are getting worse, each night is not getting any better, and it's like loneliness has followed him his whole life. I think it's like loneliness has followed me my whole life, everywhere, in bars and cars, sidewalks, stores, everywhere. There's no escape. I'm a God's lonely man. June 8th, my life is taking another turn again. The days can go on with regularity over and over, one day indistinguishable from the next, a long continuous chain. Then suddenly there is a change. I think that is one of the most quite quoted quotes in the movie, because everyone quite relates somehow to that quote. Well, they do, because they kind of feel in the same situation. They feel the same in situation as Travis is. But that's the way he explains. I think it's June 29, not June 28. The way I quit drinking, and I'm quite now. I can't remember if it's June 28 or 29. I'm kind of thinking on my head here. He has difficulty in forming relationships, and this is where I'm gonna go, where he is a demisexual. But I think that Travis is an asexual. He's part of the asexual spectrum, and he's a demisexual. I think that Travis is a demisexual because he only finds harmony in relationships when he finds a bond with people, and that's what demisexuals are. They're people who find bonds in the person. That's when they feel special. That person feels special, and that's why I say he has by way to form a relationship, and has troubles in doing that. We can see in Betsy, when Betsy dumps him, he goes into that company, like I said, and he just kind of doesn't get good like advice, and he kind of just, like I said, doesn't do good for himself. And then he goes to the cab driver, and he's like, I have bad ideas, I'm feeling down, I feel like I want to go out and do something. I got like knock the things around my head. It's not going good, you know. And then he buys guns, buys things that just probably affects him even more, I would say. Then Iris, then you remember saving her, quote unquote saving her again, and this is his like supremacy, and it's like his way of like, I'm here, this kind of like toxic, it's quite toxic. He kind of reminds me of Camus. He's from The Stranger. Marcelo, I think Marcelo. I say he reminds me of someone else, but I don't know who. But there's another person that he quite reminds me of. But again, his individualism and existence as well. He's quite of an individualistic person, because he, again, like I said, he kind of just does what kind of he wants to do, and he kind of portrays this, again, it's Dostoyevsky kind of way, maybe a bit like the Underground Man, in a similar way, who accept that he is a wretched human being who takes pleasure in inflicting pain and humiliation on others, and with this realization is utterly crippled from ever doing anything good, even if the desire to do that good has originated in his heart of its own accord, without any ulterior motive. In Taxi Driver, that's the same. The wretchedness is the same. That Travis shows, like, how he thinks about pimps, thinks about druggies, a 12-year-old who smokes weed as well, and he kind of has this kind of like, you know, Stockholm Syndrome kind of way, and he's like, he has to, like, you know, he has to go like to a dark side, and his viewpoint on humanity is to like the dark side. He's like the camera really truly explores that way, you know. And it's the kind of the worst thing about mankind is like viewing like through that kind of portrait. I don't know, it's just kind of bad. Obviously society, we explain about society, but I think we explain about the society and the way that the existentialist way of him looking at society, and especially in true like Sats and Dostoyevsky's and Camus kind of point of view. We already described the way that his imagination is, and he just killed 3 people in blind rage regardless of effects. Again, for Iris getting her freedom, it's like, and his initial plan, you know, his initial plans of doing this and that, and his like, I want to clean the streets basically kind of motive. It's like nah, I don't know. I don't know. Where you stand, I don't know. It's like where I stand is like, I don't know if that is the right thing. You know, I don't know if that is the right thing. But, you know, we all got to judge, and I'm gonna try to be objective here. Obviously, I have my own views. I'm trying to be objective here. Though I do like Travis as a character, because he kind of tries to break off the chain and tries to be different. He's kind of like punk. He has that punk rock energy, especially in 1976, now the Ramones were getting popularity. Kind of reminds me of that, trying to break something, do something different, trying to break from like the hippie movement, the hippie revolutionary era, trying to break off from the boogies and the dance and all the disco movement, you know, trying to break off from that and trying to do something that's remember the Mohawk, you know, that that does have a bit similarities to what punk rock movement was supposed to be. Even though I don't know if I would describe Travis as punk rock. I don't even know what punk rock is, because punk rock can be described as a lot of things. Punk rock is not a fashion, it's not a label, it's more than that. Iggy Pop has said himself, it's more than that. So punk rock doesn't have a label or a motive, or like this is punk rock and this is not punk rock. You know, like I hear a lot of things, this is punk rock, this is not punk, but we're moving away. Punk rock doesn't have labels. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not like, yeah, because I have blue hair, I'm punk rock. You know, this is kind of stereotyping. It's wrong. Don't do that. If you're the kind of jerk that does that, you're an asshole. But okay, now because I'm just talking about society, we live in a society. We gotta go Joker. And I think I'm gonna do part 1 and part 2 on this, because this is hella long. Because I really want to describe this in quite depth. I want to describe this quite deep. You know, this is supposed to be a depth talk. This is supposed to be. We're supposed to go and do this in a quite long manner. And it feels like I'm talking, but I think this is quite good. But okay, so we gotta talk about the psychology of Ira Fleck. I thought maybe do this philosophy first and the psychology, because the psychology of Ira Fleck we don't really know. We can define him as a cluster B syndrome, having cluster B syndrome, but that's not really. It doesn't really show us what it is. Some people speculate it's schizophrenia. I don't think it's schizophrenia. Just because he has hallucinations doesn't mean he's schizophrenic. He could have schizophrenic tensions and ideas, but it doesn't mean he's schizophrenic. He could have schizophrenic-like things. You know, there's like schizoid and schizotypal, and the personality disorders like that don't typically relate to schizophrenic. They're not the same. Schizophrenic is more serious, I would say. Schizoid is quite serious, but you can break that. You can become non-schizoid or non-schizotypal. But I think Ira Fleck's philosophy is more is clear from the beginning. He told Murray, my mother always told me to smile and put on a happy face. That is a great quote from Joker, from Ira Fleck, and from Joaquin Phoenix, who played Ira Fleck. I love that movie for myself. I watched it a couple of times. She told me I had a purpose, to bring joy and laughter to the world, regardless of what happens, be it good or be it bad. Ira tries to see things from positive outlook. Arthur's co-workers gave him a gun for self-defense, which made Ira uncomfortable, as he wasn't a violent person. Remember, at the start of the movie, he gets beat up by teenagers, young adults. I don't clearly know what they were, but let's say they were another people. Okay, he gets beat up by another strangers. And then he kind of leads to this kind of more, the bus scene, and then he becomes quite, again, unhappy that people are treating him like not good, like dirt. It's quite sad. And then he's like the sign, and he's like the worker, the where he works, it's like his day job is like, nah, my guy, you're not getting in compensation. You gotta find that somewhere. It's like, come on, bro, come on, don't gotta be that hasty. And then he took the gun anyways, but because he didn't want to be a victim, even when he got jumped and fired for suspicion of stealing the sign, he still smiled. And that's what it is. Infuriated him, like I said, but he smiled and maintained his composure nonetheless. One of the scenes that breaks down Ira Fleck, what was the train scene? The college bullies first pick on a woman. I think I said implying they were racist. Ira tries not to laugh due to his medical condition. That kind of, and the bus scene that happens as well. He kind of has this kind of laughing, like he has this laughing medical condition where he constantly laughs, and he doesn't mean to laugh because he finds it funny, but he laughs it because it's kind of his. I don't know if when he inherited this problem, but he kind of lives with this problem, and it kind of even like it just makes it like people just make fun of him, and that's why he hates it. He doesn't rescue her because he doesn't want to become a victim. He simply wants to be alone, even if she looks to him to save her. The bullies target him shortly after she leaves. He tries to maintain his composure and ignore them, but then they continue to kind of progressively just stab him, and like not stab him, but he just try to kind of like, come on, we know we want you to to kind of do something. They taunt him, and then he's laughing in the fear of crying from the fear of being a victim. I think it's probably both. Yeah. Eventually they jump him. Archer tries to laugh it off until he snaps psychologically, and then he pulls out a gun and shoots them. He's filled with anger, dread, terror, and shock, and this list goes on what he's done, and he locks himself in the bathroom trying to rationalize what happened. Yeah, that's scene. I think this is the scene where this climax. This is the scene how Fleck actually changes as a person. He then tries to kind of, even by dancing, he tries to kind of channel his negative emotions to something positive. Even the I think a lot of made the meme of him going to the fridge. That's the same way. That's the same. And then Thomas Wayne comments. I talked about Thomas Wayne and his comments about the murders of the bullies on the subway, and he defends them. Like Thomas Wayne taught the bullies were innocent college students. That's what he actually taught, who were murdered by a low-life scumbag. But that's the thing. Thomas Wayne is the example of a person who can't think deeper outside the box. He's not a guy who's gonna look into the future or into what he in his ephemeral image and think what's outside the box, bro. He just thinks, oh yeah, these were innocent, and that's why the way how Fleck lives is like this guy is not for him. He's against him. He's against the working class. He's against the people like him, and this guy is like, he likes these people, you know. He likes these like, for what he thinks, Fleck thinks, these delinquents, you know. So Arthur is infuriated because, you know, Thomas was fully ignorant. You know, he didn't know what truly happened. He just judged it because based on his assumptions, not based on facts, because, well, most things are not facts, they're assumptions, but he based on assumptions of what was happened. So he thought the judgment was unfair, and it was subjective. It was very subjective. It was biased. There was no objectiveness in his visions, in his standpoints. It was quite close-minded opinion, and he's biased. He's biased, yeah. So and then the other scene Arthur reflects the outburst scene with his therapist. You know, there's quite in the movie. There's he goes to his therapist again, and he pretty much ask the same questions every week. How's your job? Are you having these negative thoughts? And then he takes these kind of as well, these pills, and something else, and then he realizes that his funding is good, and then he like, this guy again, this Thomas guy. He's just ruining me. You know, he's just ruining me. And then he kind of finds out that he's his father. Thomas Wayne is his father, and that Arthur was adopted and allowed her ex-boyfriends to abuse him. Even locked. I think there was a scene that Arthur Fleck was locked in his hand. He wasn't locked. He was handcuffed to a radiator. I think I remember that scene. That scene was quite weird in my thing. He thought he was betrayed by his mother, who was just the only support for him. And then this Arthur slowly started to become Joker. The red suit. Everyone knows the red suit. The way that he goes down the stairs and then he just jumps around. I think this is where he opens up to be himself, and he actually tries to be himself, and he tries not to be like someone else, like Murray. He kind of tries to be his own person, and it's like, that's the most important thing too, even if it leads you to being like the Joker. And but that's the way the world leads you to be, where everyone just opposes against you. You go to lead against problems and going against the grain pretty much, and going against what you think is right. I think Frank Zappa said if you're a lowlife, he didn't say a lowlife, but if you're a lowlife because of your parents, priests, or whatever you watch on the TV, then maybe you deserve to be a lowlife. And that's kind of a way to view life, you know. If you're not the one who's kind of making decisions for yourself, and if you're letting other people make decisions for you without actually thinking, you know, thinking more clearly about yourself, maybe that's why you're boring, you know. I think he said boring, not lowlife. But yeah, I think we're gonna end part 1 here. But if you want part 2, smash the like, please subscribe and share it to your friends, please. Bye. Subscribe to my new feel what you gotta feel. It'll be vibes and describes. Fortunate lies the key of the show. Don't forget, smash like no. Some don't believe, let me know one strive. Sisters bright side, contact them to cross my mind. Find a lavish line. Sisters bright side, contact them to cross my ground. Find a lavish sign. I sit high as the gravity shines, but wouldn't transpire through bugs divine.